by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees of the State University of New York, I hereby name Aaron M. Podolefsky, President of Buffalo State College.
Thank you, Howard, and thank you all for your kind greetings. And hello, Buffalo State.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Buffalo Forum. Today, we'll hear from Dr. Aaron Podolefsky, who was recently inaugurated 8th president of Buffalo State College. I'm Professor Anne Marie Franchik. I teach journalism in the communication department. With me today is a panel of leaders from state student media here at Buffalo State. For the next half hour, the students will direct questions to President Podolefsky about his impressions and his plans for the campus. Let me introduce the student panelists. Julia Marula, Jacob Tierney, Kimberly Snickles, and David Fess. Julia will get us started.
President Podolefsky, what did you accomplish at the University of Central Missouri that can be applied to Buffalo State College?
Well, thank you for asking a good question, and thank you for inviting me here today. There are many things that can be applied from Central Missouri to Buffalo State, and some things that can't. And much of that has to do with the kinds of institutions they are. Both schools were founded in 1871 as normal schools, which means for preparation of teachers. Both have expanded to be comprehensive universities. And so both have similar core values focused on students and student success and a balance of research and service. So, but there are differences. Central Missouri was a campus of 1,600 acres in a small town, owned 2 farms, a golf course, and an airport. Buffalo State's in a metropolitan area in a wonderful urban core and has about 125 acres. So obviously some things can be applied and some things can't. Key to the things I did at Central Missouri was to help increase the graduation rates, the retention rates, the number of record first-time students, the highest in 15 years. All of that having to do with increasing the profile and the image of the institution in the area. You're never sure which comes first. You raise the image, the profile of students changes, graduation rates change. A second thing that we worked very hard on was economic development in the region. We would do it here differently because of the arts and cultural scene that Buffalo State is in, whereas in Missouri I had a large project to expand the airport and land jets. And finally I would say that a similar accomplishment was leading that institution and the one previous through fairly challenging budget times. And in the way life appears in the state of New York, we'll be doing that here as well. So I think I can look to student success, economic development, community development, and budget challenges as things I might be bringing with me to Buff State.
Jacob's got the next question.
One of the goals of the college's strategic plan is to increase academic rigor. What steps will be taken to accomplish this task?
Great. Yeah, one of the goals of the strategic plan is to provide a rigorous and transforming learning experience for students. And in that context, rigorous means challenging the right content, the right methods, etc., as opposed to what we would have called when I was a student Mickey Mouse. So in terms of the content that we're providing, it needs to be the right material, even if the material is challenging. The pedagogy, that is how we teach, doing more hands-on learning, problem-based learning, much more clinical experiences than traditionally the case, and curriculum. Probably a third example would be curriculum. That has to be the right courses in sequence to make a full program so that when a student leaves, they take away with them what they need to be successful in life. The particulars have to do, as I said, with increased clinical experiences and hands-on learning, as you've probably seen on campus.
Kim's got the next question.
President Podolefsky, how will Buffalo State accommodate everyone with the huge rise in enrollment?
The increase in enrollment has been what I would call steady and modest over the past several years. If you're right, if enrollment increases too rapidly, it becomes hard to adapt and to accommodate all the students. But Buffalo State has been fortunate. There's a decline in the high school graduation class sizes in the northeast of the United States, and Buffalo State's been fortunate to keep up its enrollment, grow modestly, and with the forthcoming budget cuts, if that's part of your question, I think that we'll have to be very clever about how we go forward with arranging our course schedules and such.
The next round of questions has to do with Albany's impact on Buffalo State. Dave?
Yeah, we know that Albany now has a new SUNY Strategic Plan in place for the upcoming years. How will we see that implicated on Buffalo State campus?
One of the things about SUNY Strategic Plan is it's really designed to bring all the campuses together to work as a system as opposed to running individually and separately. So, for example, there's some interesting ideas about teacher education programs, clinically rich experiences that are coming out of the strategic plan, and I think it will probably behoove us to take a serious look at that. There are certain areas that we'll emphasize. For example, in the teacher education area, one of the 6 big ideas is called the seamless education pipeline. The chancellor's asked me to co-chair the statewide committee that oversees the implementation of that. That will mean, for example, more attention paid to communities as well as to our classes, and to work with neighborhood groups and neighborhood organizations. And I think that will mean Buffalo State will add that to our activities or expand that. And diversity is another of the parts of the SUNY Strategic Plan. But again, Buffalo State is way ahead of the game on that and has done a terrific job. So I don't think we'll see a whole lot of specific changes, but we will work with our colleagues at other campuses to move that whole thing forward.
There's a follow-up question from Jacob.
You mentioned the fact that the college has, for quite a while now, had a much stronger focus on diversity than other colleges. However, the chair of the diversity committee, Dolores Battle, has announced her retirement soon. Is there any plans to replace her or take the committee in a completely different direction?
Well, I think at this point, across the campus, there are, because of the State University of New York system retirement package that was recently announced this summer, we are seeing a lot of retirements. And so, and I think in middle of December was when the deadline is for people to announce those retirements. Our intention would be to replace her, but exactly how we're going to do that and when we're going to do it, we want to see how many people across campus are retiring, look at the budget scenarios, and make sure it's we're ready to do that. We may want to. She's been here in that role for quite a few years. We may want to take the time to assess exactly what is the meaning and what is the need for that in that office now as opposed to how it was 13 or 15 years ago. And while we will certainly replace her and have that office, it may or may not be configured exactly the same. The campus, Dr. Battle has done a terrific job. The campus has moved a long way from where it was in those days. But we'll certainly, that's still a priority for the campus.
Julia's got the next question.
How will the college preserve the quality of its academic and extracurricular programs in the face of state budget cuts?
Well, that's also a very good question. It's a tremendous challenge. We usually say that there's a three-legged stool of quality, access, and cost. That is, it's easy to increase quality when you increase cost, or any two of those three. But it's hard to reduce cost and increase quality and access. The best answer for that is to talk about the process, which is to understand the gap between your revenues and your expenditures, and which is what the problem becomes, and to try to find many, I would call them clever ways to increase your revenue or reduce your expenditures. And those can include a variety of examples. Let me just give you a few, which I've experienced other places, but some might not apply to this institution. The first one, for example, in one institution, we eliminated the use of credit cards for paying tuition. We gave students a payment plan, which was really better for the students because they didn't have large credit card debt and interest. But as you may or may not know, the seller, in other words, the institution in that case, pays about 3% on a credit card. So at that institution, we saved $300,000 a year by giving students a payment plan as opposed to a credit card. Now, the students didn't get their frequent flyer miles, but the point being that that's a way to, everybody wins. Other ways would be putting low enrollment classes sometimes together so that, for example, the same subject can be taught in different departments under different numbers, and sometimes you might have two classes that are very small. And if you can work out ways to have them together, you can reduce cost and not damage quality. So you have to look for those opportunities to do that.
Back to Jacob.
Buffalo State has an ambitious construction plan for the next decade. How might this be affected by the possibility of further budget cuts from the state?
Another good question, and it would be good for me to talk about the two different types of budget the university has. First would be the operations budget, which we have to have each year. So, for example, if somebody has a salary, you have to pay them every year. It's rather like if you had a job and you were making $1,000 a week, and you have that continuously, and you can use that for your rent and your food and all those things that are ongoing. But you also have a savings account. And our construction budget, which comes from the state, is more like a savings account. It's one-time dollars. So the construction budget and the institutional budget are two separate pockets, two separate buckets, you might call them. So while the budget may be cut, in other words, if you were earning this $1,000 a month or a week, you'd rather earn $1,000 a week, wouldn't you, than a month? Yeah, good. $1,000 a week. If it were reduced to $900, you would have problems with your ongoing expenses. Okay, your food, rent, etc. But the construction budget is separate. Okay, so those two things sit rather separately. I would expect that all of the projects that are now underway will be funded, because I would expect SUNY has got the construction budget funded. There may be some projects that have not yet been funded, such as the stadium, that will have a bit more challenge getting those dollars. But I think the science building, the technology building, all of those other things I would not think they're in jeopardy.
Kim's question is on every student's mind. Kim?
Can students expect a tuition increase from SUNY in the near future?
Well, that's a good question, Kim. Let me start from this perspective. When I was an undergraduate, there was no tuition where I went to school in California, and there was only about $40 a semester in fees. I'm perfectly, if I had my way, university would be free. Now, I probably like that, but the question is, what's happened over the years is the state has reduced its commitment to public education. As the state has reduced its commitment, tuition has gone up. What really determines that is whether the state continues to reduce its support of public education. So it's really up to the legislature, because it puts SUNY and the institutions in a difficult position. They've cut us by $7 or $8 million in the last 3 years. That puts us in a difficult position. So what happens is you go to tuition. My preference would be to not have tuition increases over inflation, so that as everything goes up, income, food, gasoline, tuition would go up. This year it was 2%. One of the challenges in SUNY is they don't raise it for years in a row, and then suddenly they're way behind and they do a large increase, and that's not fair to anybody. It's much easier to do a modest, steady increase if you have to do that. My preference would be that they reverse the trend of failing to properly support higher education out of the state coffers.
On to questions about campus life. Dave?
Of course, a big concern about campus life is campus safety, and there are some statistics out there that show that Buffalo State is one of the more dangerous campuses in the country. What is being done to improve the safety on campus?
You know, I've heard that, and I've looked for those statistics, and I haven't found them. So maybe you could enlighten me. We do produce a Cleary report that is mandatory for all universities, and ours doesn't show Buffalo State to be higher than other institutions, to the best of my knowledge, from what I've seen.
Jacob has a follow.
Sure.
The statistics that he's referring to are actually from a report from the news website The Daily Beast, the organization that recently bought Newsweek. And those statistics compiled Cleary reports from about 480 different colleges across the country. And using those numbers from the reports, ranking certain crimes as obviously being more serious than others, they create a list of more crimes with higher rates of campuses with higher rates of crime versus safer campuses. And Buffalo State was about 34th on their most dangerous campuses list.
Well, I'd have to look at that. I've written 2 books on crime prevention. And the one thing you know about crime statistics is they're very heavily rated towards reporting rates. So depending upon how crime is reported, as opposed to people being victimized, those sorts of things can be heavily skewed. But again, I've not seen The Beast, but I'd like to do that. But I do know that an effective, for example, Operation Block Watch, which encourages people to call the police, will, if it's effective, will raise your crime rates, because more of the incidents are reported, and it's the difference between reported crime and victimizations. So again, I'd like to go back to that, and I would like to look at that piece.
Now back to Kim.
How do you plan to improve the college's relationship with the surrounding community?
Well, here again, it's a good question. Most of the relations I've seen are pretty good. If you look at all around campus, there are certain areas, in certain portions of campus where there are some difficulties that I've heard about repeatedly. And I've met with block clubs, I've met with community leaders from those groups, I've invited many people from both the east side and the west side of campus to my house for a barbecue on different evenings for different purposes. I've worked with we've brought people from State University of New York, Albany, who are experts in campus issues. And we're trying to work with those individuals, and there are also fraternities and other things other groups of students which don't have some of the best reputation. But we're trying to work with all of those groups and get to know them better and develop a relationship. I think there's some tension that can be resolved if people really got to know each other and got to know their neighbors better. I think the students that I've met that live over there have are fine young people, and they don't. There just seems to be issues with neighbors. They don't talk to each other. They'll need to do that more.
Julia's question is of concern to almost anyone who comes onto campus. Julia?
What is the long-term solution to parking problems here?
Well, if I had 1,600 acres, the truth of the matter is we had 1,600 acres in Missouri, and there was still a challenge for parking. And the problem is one of distance. So many people would like to park close. Buffalo State has a problem not only of distance, but of capacity, because we don't own enough property. There are several things in the offing. One is we're going to work harder to purchase the old impound lot. And then, of course, that's a little farther away, but we'll have to do buses and things. There may be some ways we can rearrange some of the parking, change how the cars are angled from parallel to whatever they call that when you drive in, nose first, that will increase the number of parking spaces. And I've also asked people to look into the idea that they use in certain airports where when you pull into the airport, you can see which parking lots have how many open spaces. And that would enable you to pull in and say, oh, I know there are 30 open spaces in that lot, rather than cruising the campus looking for a space. I think that might be helpful. The other thing is the master plan has 2 parking garages plus 2 levels of parking under the football stadium if we get it built. So that should help. But in the meantime, those are a long ways away. We have to do what we can. Now, the final one, which is probably the hardest, being an anthropologist, is to change the culture and have people come to work without cars.
Jacob's got the next question.
Do you have any plans to follow the example of the University of Buffalo and make Buffalo State a smoke-free campus?
I believe there was a faculty senate discussion of that starting in '09, and I think we're awaiting the result of that study by the, I'm sorry, not faculty senate, university senate. So we're awaiting that, but and other than that, I've not heard any. That's not been an issue raised generally with me. I just know there was a study, so somebody must have raised it, but the students that I've met with have not, nor have the faculty groups. So I really, at this point, don't have plans one way or the other.
I'd like to ask a question.
Oh, sure.
Will you be doing any teaching?
That's a good question. Probably, other than as a president with campus, probably not. It's something I really do miss. I very much enjoy teaching and enjoy the subject matter, enjoy the interaction with students, but my experience is that if you want to get to know students and really understand them, teaching a class is not the only way. And many presidents teach, but they co-teach, and they end up not being able to be in the class actually very often. My schedule's crazy. But what I have done is I've organized several lunches with 20 to 25 students each, and usually around a topic. But the last few, what I've done is I've started off by asking them, what are the 3 things you like best about Buffalo State? and what are the 3 things that you think we might improve. And the things they like best are wonderful. It's about faculty, and it's about orientation, and many great things. And the one that's worst, that they think we can improve most, is always the same: parking. And so that led me to really want to work on that. It's a very challenging problem, but I think what I will try to do is get to know students well by having those kind of lunches, etc., rather than teaching a class.
Maybe you could answer that question, your own question. What is Buff State's biggest asset and its biggest challenge?
Well, I think, you know, I felt from the first time I met the search committee and then came to campus that Buff State's biggest asset is the people that work here. The faculty I've met are committed and really seem to care about the students. The staff the same way. The students have been terrific. You know, you can tell when you go through the search process that when a committee is trying to ask gotcha questions, as opposed to a committee that really wants to understand what you're about. And that it was like that from the very beginning through the very end of the process. So I think first I would say the people, faculty, staff, and students. Second, I think Buffalo itself. Buffalo is a terrific city. It sometimes gets a bad rap. Some people say it snows, but it's a terrific city. And people have told me everything's 20 minutes away, and it's true. There is hardly any parking. Traffic jams. There's wonderful arts and theater and athletics, and the summer, climactically, probably the most pleasant summer I have ever experienced. In Missouri, you just couldn't sit outside on an open-air cafe when it was 101. So that was wonderful, and it's really been terrific. So that's the things. When the challenge?
Well, we'll have to wait for hearing about your challenges here. But I'd like to join the panelists in thanking President Podolefsky for the conversation today, and we wish him well as he begins his leadership here at Buffalo State. Mm-hmm. I'm Anne Marie Franchik, and I would like to thank you for joining us today on Buffalo Forum.